towards it. And actually, we used desire all the way up until we got to skill level 4, I believe we said was desire. So we said once you got to skill level 5, you should be either have a bachelor's or working towards having a bachelor's degree, be compensated with your officer counterpart that you're going to be advised. And so that's how we kind of tiered it off. Cool. And that's across all cohorts. And so we have working groups internally here at the AG school. We use the Captain's Career course. We use the Warrant Officer courses in our ALC and SLC. Due to COVID, we couldn't get it out. Use the senior AG sec to provide feedback and information. That's how I know you got it. and so we broke down through each tier. And when you look at the Army Talent Task Force on the different categories, it provides a better perspective and understanding on how we got to that. Do we just show them? Do we have them? If we don't worry about it.
Which one do you want to see something?
How do we how we got into each category?
I don't have that split.
Yes. Don't worry about it. We can get those
it's just my techie brain. And when we start trying to tell people how to rate and phase it out, if you have this many KSBs, then hey, you'll go from our organization or whatever. How do we quantify that? Because I didn't want to say, hey, we just have to have a hard set number. Maybe that commander wants a plethora of KSBs in order for it to come to their organization. So I think doing it by tier or phases or whatever is great. I just wonder how y'all did the nudge work.
But I do like, so this is what the comment on myself and some is part of what we struggle with. So who owns talent management? So we understand there's a .mil PF, everybody, if you understand, the .mil PF on modernization. So in my mind, this is a modernization. So I don't know if we ever thought about putting this modernization to and adding it to the .mil PF. Right now, the Army Talent Task Force, they're the executive agent of developing this. But at some point, I don't know, maybe someone on the line can help me out. Will this transition over to TradeOut, who kind of owns the leader development and the education, or will this morph into the Army Talent Task Force, morph into its own organization, and that would be the entity to provide the coaching and the mentoring that we're going to need if the HR community takes over as the talent manager. But everyone needs to understand, not only are the HR professional, but you have every other proponent within the Army who have developed, who's working with the talent management task force, who are developing it to understand the coaching mechanisms that's required to come up with talent management. So do we own it? And is there any talks of transitioning this over to TradeOut?
Excellent question.
We've got a question from the outstation, and they're asking, will lower skill levels be able to identify if they're actually already at a higher tier? Basically, is it stripped to that rank, or if you have prior experience, maybe in a civilian job, are you able to have that higher tiered attribute? And then we've also got General Rampy on the line.
It comes to mind, again, I'm thinking forward with if say, because there are not self-professed, but self-reported skills that soldiers will report in if say. So in thinking ahead, I believe that some of these skills that soldiers may have, regardless of the skill level, they will be able to show on their profile, the 25-point talent management profile in if say.
But I guess the bigger question is, how do we quantify? How do we certify? Just because Hector Roman saying, "Hey, I am a level 4 in people skills." I may think I'm a level 4 in people skills, when in reality I'm a level 0.05. So the question is, and it kind of goes back to what the individual online just asked the question, right? How do we determine if a person is a level 1, 2, or 3? Are we just going strictly by rank, or are we going to be able to certify a KSB? So it would probably be interesting to see how the civilian sector does it, because they've been doing it for a while. How do they certify their HR professionals to say, hey, this HR professional, is a T in decision making, or is a tier 3 in math and science or whatever that particular KSB is.
Excellent point. Yes, sir, Major.
So some are measurable. For example, if based on my background, I'm Hispanic, I have language skills, I take a DLAT. And then depending on the results of that test, that's measurable. For example, some certifications that are completely outside of the Army, which there's a lot of reserve soldiers and National Guard soldiers that their main job under civilian world is X or Y. So either they go through a certification process or they just go through regular school and attain that degree. So that's the self-professed or self-projected that they can put in. But there are others worth of discussion. How can we measure that and how can that data can be obtained to link it to talent management and make it useful for assignments or any other opportunities we may have in terms of a new position that is out there.
Excellent.
With that general ranking on the right,
Go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on when we're talking about baseline talents and some of the tier level. I would just caution, don't think so tactically and that you have to quantify. I think part of it is this is aspirational and it says baseline. This is something that we would hope someone would have at this level. But if we continue to have to quantify it, and if we continue to tie it directly to a rank or a skill level, that's where we miss out on the talent. Because some of the most talented people we have working some things, even within the directorate right now, I can name a lieutenant and I can name a captain. It's not the colonel. And so I would just caution that we identify it, and I think someone made the point is you can assess it in your evals, whatever, but don't tie me to a rank and don't tie me to a level, because then we're going to miss out on some of that talent. And so I think we say, this is what we want, this is what we're looking for. Some of it's self-professed and some of it is confirmed through evaluations. But I think we got to be comfortable with a little bit of gray.
Hey, ma'am, how you doing? Sergeant Major Jackson, can you hear me?
Roger.
Hey, thanks for joining us. Hey, so that's one of my concerns is as we develop all the talents in the KSBs across the cohorts, has there been any discussion of tying in the evaluations with talent management? Because right now it's really based on leadership competencies. If you look at the NCO evaluation. And so that's one of the things I was wondering, have there been talks between tying in the talents to the evaluation as well as the leadership competence? Over.
Yes, sir, Major. But remember, they're already tied in. It's an individual choice. And again, it goes back to you're asking for black and white. You want you must talk about talent management. Every evaluation I write, every senior rater has to say, what do they have? The propensity, the probability, what could they do in the future? That is talking about their talents, and it's just being honest about it, rather than everyone's going to be the next SMA or they're going to be a general officer. What would they be really good at? So there's some there, and I get to your point is that it's not very specific. And who knows, maybe we'll go back to the old evals on the front where we did have drop downs and they profess, but I can show you with, 10 years worth of surveys that no one looked at the front of the evaluation.
Hey, so there's a lot of big brain discussions, and I know the AG bot is working with a whole bunch of other folks to kind of figure out that strategy, and it'll take several years to get after some things. I think most folks in the Corps and a lot of folks out in the field really equate talent management to aim and ask them, kind of the employee piece for of the 4 lines: acquire, develop, employ, and retain. So that's where it's at. I think what can SSI do near term? It's probably you don't need to wait for any higher guidance to come out. I think on the officer and the warrant officer side is we become experts in the ATAP. And you can use AIM as a background, and it's probably going to look different, but basically do the same thing when IPSE comes out. But resumes, interviews, how do you scout talent? And biases. There's some things that you can do right now that's going to be good for a long time. On the NCO side at ALC or SLC, it's a little bit different with ASCM, but there's still some fundamental things to do, whether it's the new promotion system we've got. What are expected of them from the brigade sergeant major, command sergeant majors, and the division CSMs to do that? How and what are some things that's out there that we've got access to make better informed decisions or better aligned talent? If it's who, and maybe it's just, hey, let's look at what's a better way to do first sergeants. And I know Sergeant Major Rob Haney has been working with the SMA, and they piloted a couple different things. So things that the schoolhouse could do now, whether it's start teaching that to the basic captain's career course to Lawrence and ALC and SLC, but then also have them record them and have them exportable. So if I miss that because now I'm an AG major or a CW4 or I'm a Brigade S1 NCOIC, I've got access to that information, or at least that information, to make me a more effective HR professional for my command team going forward. I think that's some things that the schoolhouse could really assist to make a big difference to the entire field, at least without needing to have that level of expert of all the different things I talked about before. That's something you can start doing now. Thanks.
Hey, sir, in reference to what TMTF was doing while you were on board with the team, can you kind of explain from your foxhole how you perceive the impact of the culture of assessments can kind of help us with the talent management?
I think that's for me or General Drew as the director, but I'd at least say with assessments, it's at least the initial guidance, and this is officer focused. Kind of your company grade years, and really even as a major, it's designed for self-development. So you can better see yourself, figure out what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, and then based on those assessments, and then continue to improve. But then it becomes more predictive as you get a little bit later in your career. BCAP is like the first example. Now we've got the CCAP, and then we've got the SMAP coming on board for the Brigade Sergeant Majors. So it becomes more predictive. The data's for the Army, whereas your first decade or so, the assessment data is really for your self-development. Don Fagden would say, Fagden would say that if you take those assessments as a lieutenant, as a captain, as a major, it's in the ATAP or it's in AIM in the background running. And I kind of equate it to like if you go shopping on Amazon, you see an item that you like, and then all of a sudden you get something, hey, if you like this one, here's 5 more that look like it. If the units start identifying what are the talent requirements or what are the KSBs for the different positions, and that individual assessment data is running in the background, I can't see it as a hiring person, but it's back there. Instead of looking at 200 MI captains to begin with, I put in what I'm looking for, the type of person or those talents. And instead of seeing 200, I can see them all. Hey, but here's like the top 30 that kind of is the best alignment. They're like a 95% match of what you're looking for. So then at least I can start digging in a little deep. I'm not compromising that assessment data with the rest of the Army, so you get to keep faith with the individuals to say, hey, your information isn't going to be used or seen by others, but it's running there in the background to help shape preferences. Because the data isn't to say, okay, you've got this talent and you're going to go here because that's where we need the talent. Where the guidance has been, it's to inform preference. Hey, if you've got the talents for this job, you're more apt to be better in that job versus going to a job where you're not a good talent fit. So I think that's kind of how assessments are kind of being looked at in the future, and I'll defer to some other smart folks that are out there as well.
We've got Colonel Kirby on the outstation.
Yeah, hey, thanks. I had one comment, but Don brought up a great point, that the being able to maybe not see all those background information, but be able to preference it or look through them in order to make a decision on who you bring in, it would be extremely helpful, and that's really great. and he brought up the MI officers, but so working at INSCOM it's really important, and we just went through this rigmarole trying to look for experiences within certain units so we can develop a task force that can assist in some of the transitions that we're doing. So be able to have that capability to bring in those talented folks that have some experience in certain things to specific positions would be really great. I would definitely agree with that. And as I was talking about that, I forgot what I wanted to talk about before, so I'll turn it back over, and if I remember, I'll raise my hand again.
So I'll just add one other thing. So also keep in mind that this process needs to be flexible enough for us to be able to identify and manage talent or capabilities that we don't even know we need yet. So case in point, when Futures Command developed the software factory, they had to do obviously the old antiquated method of sending out emails and asking people did they have these type of talents. But as these KSBs are defined, and we have a system, let's say, that can help us capture this, as we start developing new capabilities, how we're going to employ the HR warfighting functions in the future, that will kind of help us manage that as well as capture the KSBs.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for your feedback. Unfortunately, we are on a time constraint. We have taken notes, extensive notes on all of your points, your discussions, and some of your questions. The open RFIs, we will do our utmost best to answer those in working groups through the AARs as well. And again, thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and I hope you enjoy your next session. KSBs that we currently have developed for the 42 alphas and our bands members. Okay, so these were the main findings that we found for doctrine. And I'll touch on point number one. This is one that I want to say Colonel Johnson mentioned. We need to be able to define what talent management truly means. And so I brought up FM1-0, the current version, looked at what is stated in terms of what the definition is on talent management, and then we picked that apart, and the question is, are we getting that right? Did we really define this to where our HR professionals in the field understand what the expectation is for talent management?
You know, this is not the first time I've heard, and I'm not trying to hold you up, about define what talent management truly means. But I think whatever you do, it should be nested. It's good you started with the doctrine, but there's a people strategy that provides context and definition for all that too, and lines of efforts. Over.
Yes, sir. So in my slide deck, I took some content out of the Army's people strategy. I provided that as a read ahead to the group. We did touch on the Army's people strategy, what the expectations is, what the message is to the field, and how we incorporate that into our cohort. We didn't necessarily go into picking the definition apart. FM1-0 versus Army people strategy is what I'm trying to message to you.
Just say that, you know, strategically, the Army campaign plan is supported by the people strategy. And if you're trying to provide a definition to people in the field, and particularly HR guys, it should at least be consistent or nested with the Army people strategy.
Understood, sir. And the secondary discussion was, at what echelon do we expect our HR professionals to be experts in talent management? And so that really drove a good discussion, whether that's at battalion, brigade, division, corps. And I think the common theme here is that it's the expectation really starts at the division and at the corps. However, you know, we obviously have input all the way down to the battalion S1s, so that because they have a role in the AIM-2 process, all the way up through division when we're, you know, talking about selecting key developmental positions for majors, captains, KDs, etc.
Hey, just to clarify, so General Evans, when these groups were set up, 50 minutes, but a lot of read-ahead material. So the background that they're talking about, they did think through the lens of Army people strategy, implementation strategy. And so I just wanted to clarify that if anybody.
Words matter. So I'm just seizing on the first sentence in the first bullet. if you're trying to define it at this level, how does the Army define it? And if you're defining it at this level, are you defining it differently than the Army's defining it? And if you are, then I'd say that's a disconnect, because the Army people strategy is what the Army senior leaders have said, this is the deal. But I've heard this comment again before about we need to truly define what talent management truly means. And I think the strategy informs that, but I'm sure whatever definition came up is nested with that. I'm just making an observation, because I think I kind of understand it when you hear Army senior leaders talk about it. I'm trying to figure out what the confusion is, that people don't truly understand about what that means with all the literature we have. That's all.
Sure. What we'll do is we'll take a look at the FM 1-0 definition of the Army talent management. We'll align that with the Army's people strategy, and then I'll owe you some feedback on that.
Look, don't take anything I'm saying as criticism. I'm just having a discussion because I've seen that statement before.
Yes, sir.
And we're now into year three or four of the talent management system that we're in. And so I was just trying to figure out what the confusion or what you guys thought you came up with.
Okay. And then transitioning to what skills do S1 HR professionals truly need for a specific position? So now we're talking in terms of the talent management aspect. Is the expectation that battalion brigade S1s, like how nested are they really in the talent management process? That's one of the questions. From an HR technical perspective, I'm thinking what type of systems are available, what resources do they have to conduct the talent management, and then how are they embedded with the Army G or with the Division G1s to get the right person with the right talent for the right leader. Transitioning into the organization, so the emphasis on Division and Corps G1 taking ownership over the talent management process and policies was also a deep conversation. The other question is, TRADOC then owns the leader development portion of talent or of leader development, and then inherently the G1s, S1s, HR, we own people. So it's safe to say that talent management then should be our inherent role. So who owns the talent management domain? Is it HR? Is it TRADOC? And we weren't trying to solve Army problems in a 50-minute brain session, sir, but we had some different input from different leaders on that.
Let me put it to you this way. What are the roles and responsibilities for those in the talent management space? TRADOC, obviously the doctrine, right? They don't execute it. The execution is done at probably the G1s. So I think our role is not that we own it,
Sure.
but we execute, right? And so at Echelon, you got TRADOC doing the doctrine, I think, and then at the headquarters DA, you've got ASMRA, and you've got G1 with the policy and the proponency for the regulation. And talent management team and HRC are all embedded. That's how I would look at it. They're all in it. They all have ownership, but I think their roles and responsibility and governance is different.
Colonel Johnson made a good statement about taking a look at how civilian companies how they are assessing their personnel. And so he mentioned that, and I'll read this to you, that most big companies are taking tests before they hire them, and then they go through an interview process. We mentioned that currently that we are looking at implementing a test assessment type to the Army that is currently in staffing. It has not been fielded or discussed with the field, but that is an option. So here at the schoolhouse, we do the Athena assessments to the students, which is more of a self-assessment tool that they get to take with them as they progress through their careers. Following that assessment through WOBC, WOAC, WOLE, whether it's the Captain's Career Course or ILE thereafter, so they can see their own progression. This test that Colonel Johnson mentioned then gives them a baseline to see, okay, this is the talent you currently possess as an individual coming into the organization, possessing a set of skills that is or not needed for this type of job. Followed with, we had another comment about officer assessments data input into ATAP to ensure that we train our S1s on what the KSBs are, and then let them input position requirements into the system and then run filters which shows refinements for the best matches. Sir, I'll be honest with you, it's been a minute since I've been in S1. So I don't, I don't know exactly if the S1s are getting trained on KSBs. So I don't know, but we do give our students here at the schoolhouse an overview of those KSBs. We do have those discussions in our classrooms.
Okay, so I have a couple of thoughts. When it comes to, where we were and where we are, where we're headed, when we look at the S1 and we look at, like we've talked terms of reference there, and we look at job descriptions. I mean, we go back to the basics. Our job descriptions are changing, right? So we have to think about talent management and how we incorporate that into job descriptions, okay? Because now it's part of our vernacular and it's part of what we have to learn how to do and at Echelon. And so I just want you to think through that a little bit, but I also want to share that specifically with this last point. I had an opportunity, I think it was last week now, time is flying already, to have a demo on something the Talent Management Task Force is working on with the logistics field specifically. I was very interested in this because we are all sustainers, and they're developing a career mapping tool. And I think this career mapping tool is going to be pretty powerful. It's going to be a development tool that is going to enable us to get better visibility over what KSBs are. And when it comes to position descriptions, whether or not somebody's meeting or exceeding those KSBs, in order to help them identify a little bit better where they are in a career plan. It's not meant as a performance tool, but a development tool. And I think as we start to see this roll out and then nest with what IPSA is going to provide for us when it comes to KSBs, I think we'll get better transparency and fidelity on how we leverage KSBs to get after best matches for the future. Over.
So Chris, I absolutely agree with you. I would just say that I would hope that a lot of that starts here at the schoolhouse with how you define what an S1 does. Because if you get outside of what you're teaching here and what you're validating here, and you get in the field and you do something different, you'll confuse. I would hope that any test or assessment that you're going to do is done here. It starts here with assessing an individual, because now you got a test separate from the schoolhouse that you're doing in the field. And we've tried to test people before in the Army. And what do you do with the people that don't test well? That's not necessarily an indication of their aptitude. I'm a slow learner. So I would just offer that to you. The person that gets the A on the test is not always the person that can lead their way through the problem. That's what's so great about the Army, because they give everybody the opportunity to lead their way out of the problem. So I would say to your comment, Chris, that's exactly what the Army Career Tracker was supposed to do. And it did not pan out that way. It was supposed to be a start to finish to monitor your career and developmental tool and what you're doing. And it has other systems in it. It's primarily used for sponsorship. So I would just say we just should be careful. Whatever career tracker tool we develop is a tool that is going to be institutionalized. It starts at the schoolhouse, and it absolutely has to be interoperable with IPSA, because ACT is not.
Colonel Lucarelli?
So on the KSB front, from the proponent's perspective, kind of tell you how it kind of works, at least on the KSB part. So, because I think there's a difference between baseline KSBs and then there's going to be unit-specific KSBs. So each proponent is going to develop their, what we think is the AG core for our officers, what are our baseline KSBs per grade. That gets filtered up through CAC, and then CAC provides that to the field. So when they develop the AIM, the branch managers, or the S1s of the unit understand if I'm looking for an AG officer during this MER, these are the baseline KSBs that we think from a proponent those officers should have. But I think that's only half the homework, because a Brigade S1 at 2nd Brigade 3rd Infantry Division is going to be totally different from a Brigade S1 at 7th Transportation Brigade Expeditionary. So they have to take the baseline KSBs, understand what the unit is, what the culture is, the mission is, and kind of take those KSBs and kind of merge it, kind of find a happy medium between the baseline and the unit specific. So I think that may be kind of the art of utilizing KSBs, but that's something I think S1s in the field need to kind of understand. You might be getting somewhat of a cheat sheet from the proponents, but again, that's only half the answer. You have to kind of match it with the unit.
Again, Rick, you and I have been in the Army a long time. How many different units are there in the Army? How many different BCTs do we have? 3 different BCTs. So why can't that be cataloged in terms of the KSBs, what a unit needs? I mean, we know what the formations are. I still think whatever you're going to do in the field, you should catalog it and it should be informed here. If you're creating 2 different standards, and I get it, I understand the culture, and I think that's where the commanders are selling themselves in the market about their unit culture and their philosophy and all that. But I would just caution you in creating a standardization here and out in the field, and then trying to say that this is what you need here. I mean, I think everybody's experience is different in IBCT versus SBCT, right? And an aviation cab, but we know what those are. And it should be cataloged somewhere.
So point 1, Unit S1s must be expert influencers to commanders, and I don't think anybody would argue that. HR professionals are advisors, and we must be able to articulate and understand individual position requirements to be able to provide good advice. I like that statement, so that's why I want to share that with the team. One of the key statements here, focusing on, again, what we do in the AGS, is that, to point number 2, is that experts cannot be generalists. We equate talent management with how we employ them, and then S1 advised must be able to review resumes and ORBs. So we look at the AIM2 model right now, that resume portion is becoming increasingly important, especially to our senior leaders. So that those things must be covered in our ALC, SLC, and our basic officer courses. So we had an in-depth discussion on that, and I'm not here to highlight what ALC or SLC. I'll let the commandant discuss that. But considering the current model and how we enter the marketplace, whether it's ASCM or AIM2, how we generate those ORBs and what right looks like, and using templates to actually display those resumes, what can be, how they are utilized, I think is important for the junior HR professionals to have. Sergeant Major Stevens.
All right, sir. So kind of goes to the point, General Evans made earlier in reference to, us as AG professionals and the ability to maneuver through situations. And yes, we want to be experts in everything that we do. But at the end of the day, the ability to be a generalist, to be that Swiss Army knife, something that we talked about this morning at the Sergeant Major's breakfast. At the end of the day, we have to be technically sound. We have to understand the pillars of leadership and apply that at echelon. It does not matter where we're at. As a HR Sergeant Major, the expectation is that you understand and you're able to do all those things. So how do we ensure that we get there, right? And how do we inculcate that at the beginning, right? And we talked about it and we said it starts down the street in AIT land. By the time they come up here to the schoolhouse, again, we're kind of just, refining those things. And then we own it out there in the operational army that daily. We're just putting, service members in situations and providing experiences so that they can continue to become experts. But at the end of the day, again, you have to be like water, and you have to be able to maneuver in whatever situation that you put in.
Well, just this Mr. Ward, Deputy Commandant AG School. And I don't want to spend more than a second on that. It's just been kind of interesting. I mean, I came in the Army in 1984, and in those days, the warrant officers were categorized by, we had records warrants and actions warrants and everything else. And then later, when I ran the AIT school here, I undersaw when we went from, Bravos and Charlies and Deltas and turned them all into hotels. And the big push over the years is we've moved from this great deal of specialization to a generalization across our force. And as I read the feedback from all of these different work groups, and as I've watched things happen here with IPSA and everything, there's going to be a lot of proposals you're going to hear about things like, let's do more ASIs, and do we need to bring back the Fox series and everything else? And I'm making just a general comment here. It seems like there seems to be some drift toward, do we need more specialization? Again, maybe not in a wide variety of ways, but maybe
where the HR community is moving is that there needs to be some narrowing of focus for at least one or two individuals at different echelons. And that just seems to be something that seems to be coming out of that.
So, Lieutenant Colonel Cruz, if you'll explain your experiences as an S1, was your focus always just personnel, or did the commander have you do other things? And if they were other things, were they PAO related? Were they other things related that I need somebody to figure out how to do it, and I need someone to do it? Just illuminate, because it's been a while since.
Hi, everyone. I just want to start by saying that I am honored to be an AG officer. So, sir, thank you for asking this question, because this is the best question for me to probably answer. I did my brigade S1 time in 11 CD. When I got to the brigade, it's the first time that I served in a BCT, an operational unit. I did a lot of time in the special operations community. And when I was given the opportunity to go to a BCT, I was not familiar with the organization and tanks and all the different platforms, but I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to learn more about taking care of people. But going back to when I went to CGSC, that's where I had the first challenge, because like General Evans said, the only thing they wanted the S1 officers, AG officers, was report per stats and numbers, right? But there was no so what. It wasn't until I went to 11 CD and I actually went to my first NTC rotation when I understood that it's more than just numbers and people accountability. Is what do you give the commander with? Okay, I have 100% in my available personnel, but how many tanks can I man, right? It's going back and doing that analysis for the commander and explaining like, hey, this is how many 19 series we have. So even though we are 100%, we still cannot go into an NTC rotation. And back then, I know Mr. Porter can relate to this, because I made a lot of promises about making sure that we had 82% on boots on ground for our deployment to Poland. And the commander, yes, there were a lot of extra duties that nobody knew where they fell. MWR, hey, we need somebody we don't have a PAO because they're short in the Army. Let's give it to the S1. And what I try to explain to my soldiers were that it is a privilege when the commander has nobody else and we make it happen. Even if we didn't have the experience or the training, we knew that there was someone who knew someone who can show us what needed to be done. So I think that everything that being here and being able to be among all great leaders and hear your experience is definitely a privilege for me. And thank you, sir, for asking me a question.
So it's not the first time that, and I've talked to young S1s who also perform the duty as PAO, but I can tell you right now, Lieutenant Colonel Cruz probably knows more about tank OR rates than anybody in here. And if you want to try that, let's try it now. But I just take a little exception with experts and not generalists. I think really it's about the leadership and being able to lead your way through a problem. Sergeant Major knows this. I will tell you, Chief, the people we rely on to be the experts are you. Goes back to Ward's point. I mean, the person in the shop is the CW5 or CW4 or 3. That's your expert. And I will ask you, are we satisfied with those experts and how they're performing? Because the one is going to be inundated with a whole bunch of stuff and has to rely on, the Sergeant Major or the senior NCO in there providing leadership. If you got the right NCO, by the way, we got to fix that. We shouldn't have a specialist or a corporal being a battalion or brigade S1 NCOIC. And if he is, then that person is a generalist who's the one, not an expert. So I'm just telling you, I'm not sure about being an expert versus a generalist. I think a generalist really, you need to understand your craft is what I tell everybody. You need to know your craft.
Sure.
But you need to also understand the other aspects of the commander's going to look and he's going to have something, and you've got to lead your way through it and solve the problem. And nothing's really changed. The rest of the staff's not raising their hand. The 2 is not raising their hand. The 3 is already too damn busy, and the 4 is a log person, and you know who it's coming to. So most S1s are PAOs for their commanders too. Who?
Well, sir, I would like to add that as your warrant officer proponent, I'm giving you the absolute best expertise
You
that the
are,
Army has provided.
and you're doing a damn good job.
Thank you, sir.
But I just, you know, maybe I'm just too old, but I get what you're saying. I would just say we have a responsibility to make sure our soldiers know their craft
Yes, sir.
and understand their craft. And I think it starts here, and then it starts out in the field with great NCOs teaching officers, those young officers, their job. There's
Understood.
been a job I've been to that I didn't have a great, even now, I have a great NCO, Sergeant Major Rafer, that's teaching me stuff every day. So it kind of, I'll tell you that's where we need to make sure we're seeing that we got the right NCOs with the right officers so the learning can start. So we're begin.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Major Laura Rollins, instructor here at ALTD. So I was the previous Brigade S1 at 2nd BCT 101st. And just coming out of that position, I will say I completely agree with General Evans and Lieutenant Colonel Cruz in reference to knowing your craft. I was getting lieutenants straight out of BOLIC coming into the Battalion S1 positions, and they weren't familiar with the KSBs and understanding and knowing that. So when you say being an influencer to a commander, you're absolutely right, because my brigade commander looked at me and said, Laura, what KSBs do I require for my company commanders, my officers, my staff that I need coming in? So when we sat down and did our talent management boards, that's what we were going through, sitting down and actually identifying all KSBs that we felt like coming into 2nd Brigade strike. What did we need for those officers and what did it take, and making sure that we implemented that and then put it into the system in AIM-2 so we could get the right officers that we need. So it is important. You do have a seat at the table and should be making that influence to those commanders. So just want to
I appreciate you sharing that, man. One of the discussions was tying into what you just said. In terms of the KSBs, is there a metric? Is there a measurement to ensure that whatever KSBs that are self-professed or self-reported by Soldier X, right, that individual actually possesses those skills? And that really drove a deep conversation. Sergeant Major Stevens was really deep into that one. And so we pulled up the KSBs, right, and we looked at the skill level 1 as an example. And so the Army Talent Management Task Force gave us a list of over 1,200 different KSBs. And so for HR, we had the daunting task over the last year to sit down, pick that apart at echelon, by level, by skill level, grade, and try to figure out how do we not only say KSB this, right? So I don't know, I'll pick one. I'm a great speaker, right? Or what's one of the most common ones, Chief, is oral communications, right? So who's to say that I'm great at oral communications? If I put that as a KSB, right, and you have unit at the Pentagon DMPM that's looking for an individual that has that tier level 3 or tier 1 oral communications, and I see that in AIM-2, and then I say, okay, that's what they're looking for. I'm going to go in AIM-2. I'm going to put exactly what they're looking for so I can be a 1-for-1 match. Where's the metric? Where do we draw the line to say this is factual, this is not? This is what you have, this is what you don't. You know, who can say that Ray Reichsa has those skills? And so that really drove a really good discussion. Sergeant Major Stevens, you want to add to that?
No, sir.
You had a lot to say in the classroom, Sergeant Major. I was just using an example, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, Rick Porter here. Just to comment on a couple of things in the other chart as well as this chart. You know, when I look at talent management, you know, my greatest fear is ensuring that the HR professional, the HR community is a relevant community, relevant to the commander and relevant to what we bring to the Army to the table. So to me, this is a huge opportunity here, you know, talent management to make ourselves relevant to the commanders, to be able to get inside their decision loops of what they're thinking. So it's a huge opportunity. And so we've talked about this before. I mean, this is the difference between art and science. You know, there's a lot of science that we teach at the schoolhouse, but how do we teach that art of establishing a relationship? Everybody in here, by virtue of where they are right now, the sergeant majors, the senior warrant officers, and the officers got where they are because they were able to master that art. But sometimes I'm not sure, you know, how we pass that on in the academic environment. You know, how do you establish that relationship with the commander or commanders? I mean, if you're a Division G1, do you go to every battalion command, change of command? Yes. Do we teach that? I'm not sure, but you should be out there engaging commanders all the time. So this art and science to me is an important part, and to get to the top, you've got to master the art, but how do we teach it? I mean, leader development panels or what? I mean, there's all kinds of expertise right here in the room of how we do it. But to me, it's an opportunity for our community to be very relevant. If the commander calls the G3 in to look at orbs to make a decision instead of the G1, we've lost the game. So, just the example. So we got, Colonel Condeep sitting over there. We are right in the talent management process right now of managing our top highly competitive colonels. So Condeep is right now talking to 4 division commanders, 4 chiefs of staff, and 4 division G1s on picking out the division commanders, the chief of staff, not division commanders, the division chiefs of staff, the corps chief of staff, the corps G3, SFAB commanders, division G3s, the list goes on, task force seniors, SFAB battalion commanders. Those are the people we're identifying right now, and she's engaged. So this is an opportunity, to do that and establish relationships with other division commanders that's going to carry you in the future. And that's not just officer side, that's the warrant officer side, the sergeant major side, and I agree with everything Sergeant Major Stevens said too. So,
Sir, I just would like to note that my commandant is taking copious notes.
Yeah, so if I,
Mr. Hickman?
so if I can, sir, I think that was the underlying introduction just about to every single one of these, is that the AG Corps as a whole has an opportunity that we can't mess up, right? When it comes to talent management, we absolutely have to own it. And there's a lot of, it's a deep process to own it, right? It's not just strength management by name. It is really, it's the developmental of positions. It's the interrelated of putting maybe a super strong S1 with a brand new W1 or, an NCO coming off the trail or something like that to ensure that they're going to be successful as an organization. And it's not just in the one, but it's really the coordination and management of that across the entire unit. Is the S1 themselves managing the talent management for 1,400 positions, or are they coordinating with the staff and the commanders to be able to make sure that they're getting the right people in the right place? So I think that was the underlying theme going into a lot of this, is that the AG Corps, you could do a SWOT analysis on it, and I think there's something that you could put in every single quadrant of that chart to where there's some serious opportunities, but we probably have some weaknesses and some threats as well too. To speak to I just want to talk about the generalist thing real quick, and we say our warrants are experts. I'd just like to highlight that over the last 10 years, the Army has, or since PSDR came about, right? So the Army reduced its numbers quite a bit. The Officer Corps and Enlisted Corps reduced quite a bit, but the Warrant Officer Corps almost doubled. And that's because a lot of the O-grade positions were rolled back to warrant officers. And I do think that there are some challenges of being experts within the warrant officer cohort as well. When we are, across the entire SRC 12, the G1, the S1, all of the broadening positions that are out in the TDA assignments, the plans and ops folks, the super data folks, we're pulled in a lot of directions where we often are challenged with being experts as well. So so we have to fall back on individual by name talent management as well there too, to keep people throughout their careers. But so sometimes there's challenges of what we believe our 603 looks like for our warrant officers and getting them to take the positions. And honestly, it's sometimes because of where their career has led them, we haven't been able to really make them experts to where that they are fully viable across the entire institution. They might not be really ready to go back to the operational Army, and they may not be as relevant, if you will, or they're effective going to a Division G1 if they went around the Pentagon for a little bit and then over to SOF and then into a SRC 12 to where they've kind of been out of the game a bit. So I do think there are some dangers and there's some realism that it's kind of hard to manage the expertise within one MOS. So I do hope the conversation can continue to possibly look at avenues to maybe create some depth of specialists, and maybe it's not the specialist, but if we create ASIs, then I can also tie those to positions, and I can create funding to create courses to really, if it's not making them experts, is to re-engaging and getting them back to where they need to be, so that we have those specific talents that we can utilize later on in their careers.
Comment on that real quick. So
Yes, sir.
I got an opportunity when I went to HRC to work on that exact problem with warrant officers and these double 11 positions, and the broadening and command staff warrants, and had a very pointed conversation with General Perna. And my first month in command was, we need to solve this problem, because we got warrant officers, CW5s, in positions where they're not helping us as the Army, because they're not instructing and they're not teaching and being technical at the tactical level. They're the command warrant. And we found out there were a number of OW5s in excess positions, and they weren't in positions that we need them in. And so what happens is once you start putting a CW3 and a staff and not down where they need to be and starting, then that person grows up to be a CW5, and they come back to a core G1 job, and they're fish out of water. So the AG bod takes a look at that. And I will also say that CW5s, you need to go where the Army needs you, and you need to be prepared to move, or let a CW4 have that job. Because I know exactly what you're talking about. When I took over the DMPM, the broadening assignments, the CW5s that were in there was a signal guy and a transportation guy. And I was like, this is the mecca for personnel policy, and we don't have a 421 Alpha CW5. I had one, but it was Army National Guard, and nothing against the Guard. But to me, that is a stair-step job. If you're in the DMPM as a CW5 or CW4, then you're ready to go up to be the Chief's AXO, because you're going to get exposed to all the policy that you can be exposed to. But when I showed up, they had this MOI for the Army, and the broadening was, I had a signal and a transporter back in there. And I'm like, well, where's the real experts? So you're right. So from perspective, do we have the talent management right for who we rely on as our subject matter experts? Because it's really you guys. Nobody knows the personnel business technically better than you guys.
Okay, and then finally, we also discussed the ensuring that us as an AGS, that we focus more on 600-25 and 600-3 discussions in our classrooms, to give those junior HR professionals a familiarization on what the expectation is along the career progression, and then down to the battalion and brigade level S1s. Okay, so these are some of the recommendations way ahead. I won't touch on every single one of these. We talked about implementing talent management training at the schoolhouse, specifically at those junior courses. Need to start equipping S1s with tools, how to read a resume. We talked about that, defining the KSBs by positions. And then the IPSA, we also discussed with Colonel Johnson what IPSA will offer us in terms of talent management tools. And so we need to just make sure that we implement those here at the schoolhouse, so that that process starts here. So they get that IPSA institutional training, sir.
Does that get after what General Evans was talking about, or define KSBs by position, unit, types, or not?
Well, it was more, the tag really honed in on when we discussed the KSBs, and we pulled a couple of them up and showed and illustrated what the current model looks like. Her comment was not to put all the eggs in one basket and not focus solely on grade plate or skill level, really just focusing on position. So that's something that we'll have to discuss further, sir.
I was concurring, riding on him about the difference in units and what the baseline here is at the school, and then what the units have by unit type and the culture. But I agree with what he was saying, that you've got to do both. But all I was saying is, we know what the types of units are. We know what the baseline KSBs are that you're teaching here. And then there are those that are in the field based on a unit, as Lieutenant Colonel Cruz described, that should be cataloged for each type of BCT for a cab. And then what you have is, once you've cataloged them, everybody's exposed to it. Because if you don't ever catalog that, then it's going to be ever changing.
Yes, sir. And I think that's what General Rampy was getting at.
Okay, all right. I was just agreeing with him. Yeah.
One of my concerns is moving forward with an ASVAB type assessment is we're currently putting into place assessments in the schoolhouse. It's the Athena project assesses various things from your interpersonal skills to how you communicate. And I want to make sure those don't get confused because it's a huge opportunity for me to have my students take these assessments truthfully so we can find their holes and not be held against them so they can start to course correct here before they go out in the field and are being judged based on those skills that they've professed with no measurement. So I do think it's important to provide some kind of measurement, but to make sure that we don't mix the two of those, that we leave an individual development process for us to get an asthma check on where folks are, but also so we can work on the art that's involved in both their own development and how to shape the force through as S1s. So I think it's a great idea to enforce these tools, but we need to make sure that we keep 2 lanes.
I'll just add because IPSA is up here as a talent management tool. So keep in mind that any assessment data that we put into IPSA can be blocked off. So if you put Project Athena, results into IPSA, you can block off who could see those. So maybe it's just the soldier, and then the soldier can link that to what KSBs are assigned to a position. So I just want to add that. But Colonel Johnson brought up a point that he and I have talked about a lot because we have folks ask us all the time, well, who's validating the self-professed KSBs? All the time. But we don't have anybody validating what you put on your resume right now in AIM-2. It's the same thing. If you're going to use those self-professed skills from a soldier or an officer or warrant officer to hire someone, it doesn't take away the people piece of what we do in our business and what commanders should be doing as part of their business. I think it goes along to with something General Evans said earlier. The EFMP app is a tool, but it doesn't take away the people part of it. You have to have that engagement. So if you're only going to look at somebody's ORB and you're going to hire them off their ORB, you're probably going to miss something. So that's the other piece of it.
So the ASVAB thing was really much more focused to, so like we go through our career branching right now, right? They come on and they answer like 5 questions, and we grade them on how well they talk and stuff. But really it was more towards the cognitive testing and maybe their self-awareness and all this stuff to be able to do cognitive testing, just really to branch people the right direction, to put them in the branches that they're going to be most defined. I think the stuff that they're doing in the schoolhouse as they're, as part of Project Athena, that allows them to self-develop. But, we used a lot of the, for cyber, right? Do they go out and take a hacking test, right? Or they go out and there's certain things that they have to do that can say this person will probably be successful in this field. And I do think at some point that talent management gets there. I've always thought that Project Athena should start at the, in ROTC, right? To where those folks that truly that PMS has been living with them for 3 years probably has a better ability to maybe mentor and qualify them than, a Bullock instructor that has them for 9 weeks or 14 weeks or whatever. But I really think that's where we got to there, was really trying to, pre-accession understanding how people will, what we believe that they would be more successful in one branch or the other over.
Okay, and we did discuss the 25-point survey that Colonel Johnson mentioned, and then and as you mentioned, Chief, the assessments down at the junior grade level and maybe even lower. So that's a good point. So pending your questions, ladies and gentlemen, are there any questions from the outlining stations on the net? Okay, sir, any final comments?
Yeah, good job, Jim.
Thank you, sir.